Good. Hi, welcome. It's Roy and Val again coming back with you. It's been a couple of weeks, and so we're a little late. That's why we're a little late. Sorry.
We're rusty.
But this is the last session, sort of on doing the copper foil technique. I think we're calling this one finishing and caming or something, right? So we're going to talk about how to put the zinc around the outside. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about how to put a wood frame if you want to do that. We will talk about patinas.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, right. We got all that stuff. So
Nice.
we can.
The
show you
wood's
how to
over
do this.
there. Did you know that? The wood?
I got some.
Oh.
I think
Oh,
I
you
got it.
okay.
We think we're all set. So, if you have any questions while we're talking, feel free to, make a comment in the section below, or you can always message us at
everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, email, facebook@delphiglass.com. Call us. We're here for you.
All right. Thanks, Kaylee, for helping us out
Good
there.
job.
So this is that same panel that we've been working on for a little while.
It's taken us a while, hasn't it?
It has taken us a little while, but I've already pre-cut some of the zinc just to make it go faster. We're working with what's referred to as an adjustable U zinc, and if Kaylee can zoom in on that, you can see the end of it, what it looks like. You'll see that there's a space there. How it's adjustable is we can actually pry this open. If the glass is too thick, you can use, which I didn't bring,
I was just going to say, I don't
a
see
fid or a burnisher to come in here and widen the channel if we need to. That's the adjustable part of it. Well, one thing you'll notice when you're looking at the end of it is that the glass doesn't sit all the way at the back of the cane. So we have to compensate for that when we're putting the zinc around the outside of the panel. And I think that, we around here, we think you should put zinc around all your panels, right? I mean, if they're square or rectangular, mainly for the durability. I mean,
not for the strength. It's just
right.
not. If you pick this up without having a frame around it, the weight of it, I can even feel it buckle a little. I mean, there's just no stability in it yet. But you put it in a frame, and it's amazing how really it is, how strong it is. I know you're laughing at it, but I think it is amazing.
Yeah, it is, especially this panel, as Val's pointed out. I mean, it's not that large of a panel, so imagine going even a little bit bigger than this, and you'll really start to feel some of the flexibility in the panel. Again, the zinc not only acts as a frame and aesthetically makes it look kind of nice, but it also, adds some strength to it. The zinc comes in a couple of different sizes, and I just realized I didn't grab some of the other ones, but I think you can kind of get the idea. This is the face of the cane, and so when you're looking at online and looking at the sizes of the different canes that we sell, it's going to refer to what's called the face of the cane. So this is a 3/8 inch, so that's 3/8 inch here. It doesn't talk about how wide the channel is, or it doesn't talk about how much space is back there. It really is strictly just the visible face of the cane.
Is the channel pretty much the same, even if the face gets bigger, though? Does it?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. So if we went to a wider zinc, then it's usually the hole in the back that gets wider. So the channel is about the same. It's like about 3/16, I think. I measured it earlier, and it's around 3/16. So your panel should fit in there pretty nicely. So since we're assuming at this point that we're done with the panel, right? We've already soldered it, we've cleaned it, and we talked, I know, in our last video about cleaning it. And if you didn't get a chance to see that, you can always go to our video page on our Facebook, or you can check us out on our YouTube channel. So that's a little plug there.
We're just showing off now.
She's just amazed I can remember that to say it, right? We usually have a little note that reminds us. But. So I have a couple of little pieces when I'm cutting the zinc. I always have a couple of little pieces that I use kind of as spacers. As I mentioned before, since the glass doesn't sit to the back of the zinc, I put a couple of pieces on here. And that's going to tell me where I need to cut the zinc. And I like to cut, I think you might agree, Val, right? Do you cut the sides first, right? The vertical pieces first. Oh, I guess we should talk about that, right?
And they extend beyond they're like goalposts, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the sides are longer. They overhang each end. And then the cross section, or the horizontal part, fits in between those. So I always think of doing the outside first, like goalposts, and then I can cut the inside to fit. That's how we do it. Because then that gives us a good place here to countersink rings.
Yeah, do you see the how we're going to do this? So the technique that we do here is we butt the zinc up against the other piece of zinc. I mean, a lot of times people would cut like a 45-degree angle here and then just put the two pieces together. But I don't know if you're like me, but it's sometimes trying to cut a nice 45-degree angle is not always that easy. Sometimes they don't match up very well. The other issue is, and this might come as a surprise to, I know it doesn't to me, but my panel might not be exactly square. So, so if I cut perfect 45-degree angles, they probably won't fit because it's possible one side's a little longer than the other or something.
And also, the way we solder this, you go to all the trouble of trying to make that a mitered corner, and then you're just going to put a blob of solder right over it, and you really can't tell that you went to all that trouble, and it's easier to make it fit this way.
And Val mentioned we're going to show rings, how to attach rings to this too, and we think in this way of constructing the cane, it leaves us a nice spot to attach rings to the top. I like too on the bottom it's open so that when we're cleaning the panel afterwards, any moisture in there will just kind of drain out through the bottom of it. And it will show you what it looks like, and you'll see it's really not that noticeable that there's holes in the bottom of the panel or something. So since I have these little spacers here, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to mark where I need to cut the zinc. So on the vertical pieces, right, the sides, I want to cut this right outside where that zinc is at. I know for me, I just, I mark it with a marker, and then I, tell myself, okay, I have to cut on the line or cut off the line or cut to whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever helps you remember where you need to cut it. I try to always remove the black line is what I'm thinking when I'm doing this. And so cutting the cane, there's several ways of cutting the cane. I think, we have this nice little miter box, which is, have you used these before, Val?
Yeah, not this particular one, but the older ones we used to have. But they work, the saw works really good.
Really well.
Yeah.
It's a nice, inexpensive way, I think, if you're trying to, find a nice way to get the cane. So how it works is, it has like a little extra, more of a lip here, so it catches the edge of your table, which is a nice way of kind of stabilizing it. And then I can slide the cane in, and then I just have to hold it. I guess if you want to, you get a C-clamp, and you could probably clamp it all down, but I find I can hold it well enough. You'll notice that these come with a nice 45 too, so if you do want to cut a 45, it's already in here for you. I'm not going to actually cut this piece because this is one that I cut earlier and I need to fit it, but you get the idea, right? So it comes in like this, and then you just move it back and forth. Let me show you briefly on the saw. I'm sure it's hard to see even on the screen there, but this has tiny little teeth on here, and that's sort of the key to cutting metal, anything metal like the zinc is. Small teeth will give you a nice clean cut without like chewing up or tearing up the cane too much.
Mm-hmm. And it's really amazing too. I mean, you're not actually physically doing it, but literally to saw this in half, or to saw a piece of this, maybe 4, 5. I mean, it's not like this forever. It goes this really does work well. 4 or 5 like this, and you're done. So it's a real good option instead of using this fancy.
Yep. Otherwise, we have this. This is the Studio Pro miter chop saw. So electric, right? So, I'm always in a hurry, so I kind of like using the power tools because it goes a little quicker. This one, you can see the blades there, same sort of deal, right? Small little teeth for cutting metal. I can put the zinc right up here, and it kind of gets stabilized back along these little bars back here. I'm not going to turn it on right now, but I'll show you sort of how it works. So it's going to come down and cut into the zinc. I think one of the nice things about this saw is that the power, when I push the button, the motor comes on, but as soon as I take my thumb off it, it shuts off. So to me, that's part of the safety thing of this. So whenever you're cutting, you think something's going wrong, all you have to do is take your thumb off it, the motor quits, and you don't have to worry about a blade continuing to kind of run. I am going to cut this one though real quick, so I'm going to put on some safety glasses. And then we're going to come down here, and I'm going to see where I'm going to cut. I think I told myself I needed to remove the black line, so that's going to be good enough. Now, one thing the saw is not really good at is you can't lay it on the material and then turn the saw on. It works a little bit better if we turn it on when you're just above it. That's the other thing I forgot. I was just remembering. So sometimes you get a small little metal burr. You can probably see it right there, right? Oh, it kind of fell off. A lot of times I'll use if you have a metal file, you can just hit it with a metal file and kind of take that little burr off. We use abrasive stones around here, so sometimes I use that. Yeah, you can use any kind of thing. Val found this nice little, it's kind of overkill, a little diamond coated file, but it works. What's nice is sometimes it's, you want to get that little burr off. It just makes it easier when you're trying to attach everything back together. So then we're going to set that back on there, and we're going to like see how I did, right? So it looks like that matches up pretty good. Like I mentioned earlier, I've already cut some of the cane to go faster, so I've already cut the left side of the panel here. One of the things that I found is that it's probably better to just measure and cut each side instead of cutting two sides that are the same length. Because more than likely, you know, it's possible that, again, that the sides aren't exactly identical, and you might as well cut them each specifically to fit.
Yeah, right. And this is a situation too where, unlike when we solder, we have spaces that we can fill those spaces in with the copper foil method. We can actually fill in if we have some spaces. When we're doing this framing, it doesn't really work well if you have a space. You can't really get the solder to bridge as well. So you really need to touch, right?
Yeah,
it needs to really be so that you don't have a gap there because your solder will keep.
Yeah, the solder won't jump over the gap. So now we're going to do the, on this one I'm going to do the top part of the panel. So these are the horizontal pieces that Val was mentioning earlier. And this, I think, for this technique that we do, I think this is the trickiest thing for people, don't you think, Val? That sometimes it's hard for them to kind of grasp it in that, as Val mentioned earlier, this piece here needs to fit inside the two vertical pieces. So I'm gonna, you notice I left this one over here, it's where it's supposed to be. Then when I come on this side, I'm gonna slide this one up, and now I'm gonna cut inside this, inside of this part here, right? Because that one has to rest inside the two vertical pieces. So I just mark it. I'm gonna come back over to the saw. Again, I'm using the power one because I'm always in a hurry. So. Let's hit it with a file real quick. I think this part was more important to get that little burr off because then we want it to fit tight up against the vertical piece, right? So we want to make sure there's nothing really kind of stuck on there. So that's pretty good. Slide it on like this. And you can see that, oh, that's not too bad. No, I thought I had a gap there. You know, and what I've done, I don't know if you've done this before, Val, but like as Val was mentioning, like if there was a gap here, I'll kind of create one, right, like this. The solder won't jump over that. What I've done in the past sometimes is take a piece of wire, like copper wire, you've done that, I'm sure, right? And then stick it in there, and then use that so you can bridge over it.
I've actually sometimes slivered off
a little piece of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the point is you got to fill the gap with something, and it can't just be solder because the solder won't stick there. So then we're going to kind of pin that down. Now, if for some reason, like on the vertical ones, if you cut them a little long, I don't think, or even a little short for that matter, it's not that big of a deal. What I always do is line up the bottom. If this is the bottom of my panel, I line that up so it looks nice and clean across this way. And if the top is off a little bit, it's not going to be that noticeable because we're going to solder some rings in there, or if you put a wood frame around it, right, it wouldn't be as noticeable. So we're going to solder these joints, and then so I'm going to pin them. I grabbed some of these metal push pins, something we used last time when we were soldering just to kind of hold things in place. And what I always do is, if you can kind of see, I'm pinching the two corners together because sometimes, again, my panel might not be totally straight, or maybe your zinc got a little bend to it, but if I kind of squeeze them together with my fingers, and that way I can make sure that they're really nice and tight. And then I'm going to solder those together. Oops, I moved that one too much. This is when you start pinching them, this is where you can really tell whether or not how well you cut it, I guess. As you can see, this cane looks a tad long to me, but like I said, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, Val did some, thanks for pinning it for me.
I was trying to help.
Thanks. One thing, hopefully you'll notice that when we pin them, I don't pin them real tight up here against the corner, right? I leave myself a little space because I have to have room to get in there with the soldering iron. So, looks all right, right?
Yep.
Let's give it the final inspection.
Sometimes you have to be a little careful because if you put these too tight on, they rock up.
Yeah, that is true. Especially some of the smaller canes, sometimes you will notice that they will kind of rock up a little bit. So she's right, we want to make sure they're not.
And Roy, again, remind us what size this cane is, please.
This is a 3/8 inch adjustable U zinc is how it's officially called. So.
And the size isn't hugely necessary to, depend. We just use this one because we happen to like this size. Yeah. But you could go bigger, you could go smaller. It's just, kind of your personal preference. Usually if you go bigger, you would use bigger, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's probably kind of a standard thing, right? The larger panel that you would go with, possibly the larger zinc you would go with. But Val was saying, I mean, for the most part, we're making decisions aesthetically, right? How we like how the frame looks, I guess.
So we're going to solder.
Yeah, so we're going to solder it. So Val's going to.
Well, we're just going to put a little, same thing as our other soldering, a little flux. I tend to do one at a time. I don't, you can do all four corners if you want. Then I like to kind of take my solder off to the side a little bit. You don't want to hold it over the metal because this is another situation where if I drop on the cane itself, I might not get it off. So I put a little on the end of my iron like that. And then I just kind of go down and up. I don't know what you do.
Yep,
but
that's exactly what I do.
Just sort of down and then up. And this is the part you can mess with a little too much. See, now I'm so tempted now to make that a little better.
Yep.
I probably don't really need to, but I might anyway.
Yeah, the thing is that last time we were showing soldering, we were talking about moving the iron and having it flow. Here, you don't want to move the iron too much because then it will start to spread the solder. And you really don't, as Val was pointing out, we want just a small amount of solder just to get that joint. You see how it just kind of covers and we don't want to really do much more with it.
I'm good with that one.
Yep.
Deborah's asking, would you still put zinc cane around a larger piece that's going to have a wooden frame?
That's a good question because I was thinking we should address that.
Val and I think, and I think probably most of us here at Delphi, I think you should always put zinc around your panel. It really adds strength to it. Where you're really going to notice that at is what Val's going to do. I'm kind of a little premature here. Is that we're going to solder any seam that runs into the zinc cane, like any of these seams that run into the zinc. We're going to solder that, and that's really where you get your strength from, right? That little attaching it to the zinc. So yes, I would go. Especially the bigger you go, I think probably the more important it is. The other thing I don't know if you can notice that Val's doing with the soldering iron is she's actually using the flat part of the tip of the iron. If you remember that it's kind of a chisel tip, so as she feeds solder into the flat part, she's going to go flat down onto there. And what this does is it kind of helps keep the solder from staying a little flatter. This is one of those situations where we don't really need a big raised bead of solder like we're normally aiming for.
We actually don't want. We just want the minimal amount to make the solid connection, and then this is not something you can work with a lot and try to make it real smooth or really. You just want to get it on there, and then we would do the other side as well.
Yep, we would flip over, do the other side, but I think just because of time, we're not going to. But pretend like we soldered the other side. We would do it the same way. And obviously, if we were doing the other side, we could take out the pins. We wouldn't need the pins holding it together anymore.
Yeah, they're always.
And then Val's gonna do some soldering, I think, on where the joints are at.
Yeah, these are sometimes a little tricky, but we do have to, where we left the copper there intentionally, we do have to bring that solder up to the frame itself. And so, depending on how much I have back in here, sometimes I'll actually carry some from the back, but whoever soldered this actually did a pretty good job, and I think it's probably going to have to add some. So
I think it was you.
Yeah, I think it was. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to melt this. I go back into the seam. I drag over and rock on, and then right back into the seam. So my purpose is I don't want to drag a bunch up onto the frame. I'm trying to, we're trying to be minimal about this because, this is the structural part, so it has to be done. But you're trying to not just drag a big glob up onto the frame and have it look kind of.
Yeah, that was like a perfect attachment, right? So as Val mentioned, you just wanted to kind of grab the zinc, the side of it. there's really no reason to go, like as she mentioned before, to go up on top. It doesn't make it any stronger, you know, by adding more solder to the top of it.
So Kathy's got a comment here. I've been told that I don't need to put the zinc in the bottom edge, particularly if I want an uneven bottom. Do you guys agree?
I'm not really sure
I
I
mean,
understand that.
it's an organic looking bottom on, it's not a yeah, I don't know, I guess I'm not getting it either.
I mean, if it was like, if it's square or rectangular, I would think that you would want a bottom. Right? If you're talking about something that's irregular, I mean, yeah, often we don't put zinc around those, right? I mean, it would be
Right.
too much of a challenge. So hopefully that was.
Hopefully that's what you
Yeah.
meant. I'm not really, I mean, if it's not what you meant, let us know.
Yeah, let us know. Because we're not sure. So one thing that Val's doing here is, so we had a little bit of a gap, right? So Val's just putting some solder in and then giving it a minute or two to cool down. Instead of trying to just attach that seam to the cane, the solder is going to bleed through it, right? So, put a little in, let it cool off, then come back and try to attach it.
And if you guys didn't watch the last video, let's kind of touch on why we didn't solder at those edges.
Yep, so if you remember from the last video, what we did was we purposely tried to stay away from the very outside edge, like about 1/4 of an inch or maybe even 1/2 inch from any outside edge. We'd try not to solder for this reason here, because we're going to attach the zinc, and it's just easier if there's no solder on the seam. Now, if you accidentally soldered all the way to the edge, that's not a big deal either, right? So you can just flatten the solder. Again, use the flat part of the soldering iron. You can come back into your seam and just flatten it back out. You can bleed some of the solder off. I mean, sometimes I just use gravity to do that. I'll pick it, like you can pick it up and take the soldering iron and then drip off some solder if you got some too close to the edge. So we just try to avoid it at the beginning, but
Yeah.
And that way it fits nicely into the channel of the cane.
yes.
Kind of rushing this, so,
Oh,
but we can do the, rings.
Yes.
We can do the rings.
Okay.
Because that's deep. I mean, I could go back in a minute and
pretty
smooth that out, because at least I'm hooked on there.
Yeah, so
I'm
yeah,
gonna
sometimes like especially when there's a gap, as Val's kind of hinting at, is that we just go in and attach it, right? And you don't have to worry about how nice it looks. We need it to grab on. The key is to give the solder a chance to cool down. I think we talked about that last week too. That sometimes the issue with soldering is we all want it to look better and cleaner, so we spend too much time in one area trying to make the solder look nice, and we get it too hot. The solder bleeds through, or you run into issues with cracking glass. So it's better just to, once you get the solder attaching, give it a chance to cool down. You can always come back later to make it look a little nicer.
Right. So what do you want to do? You want to go ahead and do rings? Or what?
Yeah,
let that cool?
We're gonna go ahead and attach some rings to this, just because, just to make it go a little bit quicker. I don't think you need us to watch us do every scene, or watch Val do everything. I'm watching you. It's pretty good. So we sell some rings. They're jump rings, right? So they have like a split in them. I don't know how well you can see that. It's really, really pretty small, right? There's a little split in there. And I actually sometimes pry those apart. Oh, yeah.
What are you going to hold it with?
My fingers.
While Val looks for that, Lori's got a question. Do you usually wear masks when you solder? Are the fumes toxic?
Oh, that's a great question. We talked about this in our last video a little bit when we were soldering. The concerns with soldering is, let me answer your question first. I normally don't wear a mask as long as I'm in a room that has some ventilation in it, and it has to be just even decent ventilation. Doesn't have to be anything great. I know when I'm at home, sometimes I just open a window. Sometimes I'll put a small fan on my work area and have it blow this way, so it blows across how I'm working. The concern here is not with the solder, so we're not creating any fumes, so we're not breathing in lead vapors or something along that line. The concern is the flux that burns off. So the flux is an acid, so probably not something we want to breathe in. We talked last week about trying to use a small amount of flux as possible to minimize anything that might be coming up. So again, if you're soldering and it's spitting at you or hissing and you're seeing like smoke coming up off, you're probably just using too much flux and just need to back off a little bit, and then it shouldn't be such an issue. So, hope that helped. So yeah, Val was giving me a hard time because I'm not going to be able to hold on to this ring without once it gets hot. So I don't know if you can see this. I pried apart this jump ring a little bit to leave a little bit of a gap. Now these are made out of nickel, I'm pretty sure, so it'll hold up to the soldering, and it will stay this nice silver color. But if you look at the end of the cane here, I guess I have it upside down. This is what we were talking about this is where we're going to attach the rings. Now some people, when they attach rings, they'll do it to what's called the face of the cane like this, but I don't know.
No.
Yeah, we don't feel so good about that. We don't think that's as strong. So if you'll look in there and see that hole, you see there's a little piece of the metal there, and we'll slide this ring right on top of that. So do you see how that sits? And if you look at it from this angle, you can see that now the ring sits down into the frame a little bit.
And then countersink, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then so now when we add solder to that, we're going to be doing it pretty well. I know, like on larger panels before, I've actually taken copper wire and wrapped it around the ring, fed it all the way through this, and then soldered it again at the bottom. You know, just to add a little bit more strength to the ring, so that there's less likely chance that that's going to fall off. The trickiest thing about doing this is, well, one of them was I don't know, I'm going to have to do this like backwards, I think.
Why?
Because normally I do it like this, facing me.
Well, what do you want me to hold? I was thinking maybe I should hold.
Oh, do it straight up?
Yeah.
Ooh. I think I can. Okay, we can try this.
Try it.
All right.
You can.
Let me show you the setup first for those of you that don't have an assistant, and when you're at home. That wasn't very nice.
No.
She's not really my assistant. So when I'm doing this at home by myself, what I do is this. I know it's kind of hard to see, but I have the end hanging off the table, and then I pin it like this. That way, if I bump it, it doesn't slide out of my way. And then, again, what's really important is to make sure you have something to hold the ring with, because the ring is going to get really hot very quickly, and you're not going to be able to hold on to it anymore. And then I would come in and solder it here, right?
Can you see? Okay.
I know it's kind of hard to see with the. Can you see? Is this all right?
She can see. So why don't
we're
we
going to
just do it
try
that
it.
way?
We're just going to try it. Okay, so this is a. I'll be
Okay.
right back. So this is one of those things that takes like 3 hands, right? I have to hold the ring, hold the soldering iron, and hold the solder. So obviously I can't do all those things. So I set my solder up like this. If you can see that little kind of interesting setup. And I'm going to come in and grab solder this way. Now, Val, when she was talking about trying to keep the solder away from your panel, because you don't want to drip solder on anything here, because it could stick to the zinc, or you've already soldered that. So, you know, if you drip some solder on it, you'll have to go back and fix it. So I'm trying to stay away from my panel if I can. If the tip is nice and clean, it will grab the solder pretty well and not fall off, if you notice that. But I did not flux anything, so let me, we need to flux the ring, right? And then flux the opening, which you probably can't see very well, but I would go in there and just kind of throw some flux in there. I know it's...
But I think that's one thing people forget, is to flux the ring. You've got to flux the ring.
I would agree with that, right? So we're going to come in here, grab some solder. I'll tell you, as Val mentioned earlier, I don't know if she mentioned this. This is, to me, I think always one of the trickiest parts of that, right? Just trying to get that on.
This is kind of a good way to do it too. Just make sure this solder's probably going to drop on the floor, so make sure you've got a.
Yep. Yeah. Make sure you have something down on the floor. And I'll tell you, I sometimes just have a piece of. I used to use newspaper, because the solder will cool enough by the time it hits, so it won't burst. The paper won't burst in the fire. I don't know if you saw this. I'm going to do it one more time just so you can see it a little bit closer out and out. So I have solder on the tip, and then I turn it towards the panel. Right, and then it should come off, and then I wait 2 or 3 seconds, give it a chance to, set up, and then I can let go of it. Now, that's not good enough, right? I mean, that's not really good enough to hold the whole ring in place. We want to fill in this entire opening, right? We don't want to see any gaps here. Now, if you were doing 2 rings at one time, I think it's even a little bit easier, because then you can work from one ring to the other while one is cooling down. Since we're just here running our mouths, it's giving us time for this to cool down. But normally, the risk is if we get the solder too hot, the ring just pops off, right?
But you also need to, this is the tricky part too, because you also really need that solder to heat that metal, so that it's not just a surface weld.
Yes.
Because if you didn't really get that metal hot enough, you literally can lay solder on the top of it, and then it just, when it cools, just pops right off. So it is tricky once you get this kind of filled around. Then you do kind of have to go in and make sure that it actually melted to that ring. And
let me show you. So I'm going to grab some more, And then I'm going to turn it towards this and just kind of turn it. I tap a little bit, and then so the solder comes off. This iron is running pretty hot. This, I don't know, the iron feels like it's running hot to me, but. So hopefully you notice all I did was wait for the solder to leave the tip of the iron, and then I moved it out, right? I'm trying to get all the solder melting. I just want to get some solder in there, and then I'll show you what we're going to do, right? As Val mentioned, we're trying to not to just have the solder on the surface. I need the solder to flow into the hole. So I know I'm going to just grab a little flux here just because it helps the solder to flow a little easier. Sorry. I'm going to grab just a tiny bit more. You notice also I'm kind of tipping the panel. Partly so I can get the iron in there, but also in case the solder drips off, hopefully it drips kind of down onto the table and not slide along the face of the cane here. Can you see what it looks like in there, right? So I think I might have enough solder. Usually now what I'm going to do is just come in, again, I'm going to just touch it with some flux. Now, one thing you probably didn't notice is that I'm not dipping back into the flux. There's enough flux on the brush that I can do all of this stuff without having to grab more flux. But here I'm just going to come in and heat this up, and as soon as it melts, I take the iron away. What I'm trying to do, again, is get the solder to sink into that cane a little bit more and not just be up on the surface. Again, the risk is, hanging around too long and getting the solder too molten that the ring wants to fall off. So as soon as I see it melt, I just move it. That looks pretty decent, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Sometimes what happens is, putting a ring on, you can mess up the face of, that little solder thing that you had there. So if Val doesn't mind, I'm gonna just touch it real quick. And then again, so I just, hit with a little flux because it helps the solder to flow a little easier. And then it is just gonna be, I'm just gonna touch until the solder melts and then pick it up. And then hopefully I smooth that out, so instead of leaving that little glob on there. One of the things I tell people about rings is that you should check it, right? Make sure, it works. And don't grab it with your fingers, obviously, because it's going to be pretty hot. But I just use a flux brush and hold it up. Our opinion around here is that one ring should hold your panel. And in fact, when we hang things, we always hang them from two separate chains, right? So we don't do the chain to a O-ring and then back down to this ring again, right? Because if one of those three things, something happens to it, the whole panel is going to fall. But if you go, two separate pieces of chain, if something does give way, you've tested it and you'll know that at least one ring will hold your panel, right? So that's a little safety thing.
Okay.
And if you have questions, like I said, feel free to.
So what about, what about the wood frame, right?
Yeah,
You
so
show the wood frame?
I am going to show the wood frame real quick, but let's also, then we'll talk about patinas, so we got a couple other things.
I forgot.
One thing is, in our little studio space here, we don't have any running water, but normally we would have to clean all the flux off this, right? And we did, Val did a nice job of trying to contain where we did the flux. We only did it in a few spots, right? At joints, in the corners, that type of thing. So I'm going to use some a flux cleaner here that doesn't need to be rinsed. I think when we were talking about fluxes last week, we talked about flux cleaners, and we have a couple of them that work really well. Again, flux is an acid, so we need something that's going to neutralize the acid. So these have a base in them that will neutralize the acid. This particular one, like I said, we don't have to rinse it with water, and to me that's probably the greatest thing. So I'm going to peel this back real quick. So I'm just going to hit a few spots on here. I'm not going to clean the entire panel because, again, we don't have a sort of time, but at least let me get the top, and I can spray it on there with the.
So what Roy is using is the Quick Clean.
And then we can just wipe it off, right? So, look how nice
it does look good.
Isn't that nice? I know, that was nice. I know, we're impressed. What's nice about the Quick Clean too is, again, if you're working with a really large panel, you might not have a bathtub or a big enough sink to actually clean and rinse off your piece.
Or want to carry it that far.
Or want to carry it. So that's nice about this one. It's great for doing this sort of stuff. Or when you're just coming in and you're just soldering a little spot, you don't need to clean the entire panel because you've only used flux in a little spot. We will finish cleaning the other spots later, but for now we'll just kind of move forward and hit those joints.
Are you going to patina?
I was going to do a little bit.
Right.
Question for you guys. So if you were to not use a flux cleaner, what would that look like long term on your project?
Yeah, you get some oxidation.
You get some oxidation, and it's lots of times people think that's like tarnish, because you know tarnish you can rub back out. Oxidation you can't. It's almost like a white.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like a white crusty stuff or something. So virtually, I don't know about you, but the only way I've ever been able to fix that once it occurs is to go back and remelt my solder sleeves, and so that's kind of a pain. You don't want to do that. So. And not getting the acid off when you clean it is a major promoter of that. So that's why we feel real strong. I know there are people who just use dish soap and all that, and they think that works fine. But you and I've never felt like that was enough.
Yeah, no.
So you know, it's obviously everybody's choice. But think about it. If it's this little panel and I have to go in and remelt all those seams, then that's not a huge issue. If it's you know, some big panel or big window or something like that, I'm going to do my best to avoid having to do that. So
yeah, and I always tell people, I mean, you spent all that time, you know, cutting and grinding and fitting and foiling and soldering. I mean, just, you know, invest in a nice cleaner and you won't have to worry about it, right? Again, I think Val was saying, if you're seeing anything that looks white and kind of crusty in the corners and stuff,
chalky or something.
That's
it's hard to
some kind of oxidation that's occurring because you didn't get the flux all the way off. So, wow, we just like really pushing the.
Really, we are.
Weren't we?
Wish we
Like
had
we get
stock in it.
A
I know.
kickback from it. We don't. So I was going to talk about wood frames real briefly, just to let you know that there are other options. I have pre-cut a bunch of it, again, just mainly for time. But this is an oak framing stock. We sell this here at Delphi, and we sell it in a few different sizes. This is the 1 3/8. And again, when you're reading sizes with any kind of cane or framing, it has to do with what's called the face of the cane, right? So so we have ones that are bigger. This happens to be the smallest one. I did cut these at 45-degree angles because we need to. I don't know if you can see, what's nice about this wood frame is it's got a channel right in the middle. So your panel looks nice from either side, right? You know, picture frames are only like, you know, the rabbit's only on one side and you don't, you know, it's cut open in the back, right? So you can put your piece in there and then, you know, it looks best only from one side, but these will look nice from both sides. So if you're hanging it in a window or something, it should look pretty nice.
It won't go on because the rain goes into it.
Yeah, I know I put a ring on it, so I probably messed myself up because I had some kind of a system to this whole thing.
Oh, did I mess you up by
It's
doing
all right. It's no big deal. I wrote on B for bottom and T for top, so I knew which way they go. So, but they would go on something like this, and then this would come on here to the side, and you can see for the most part it covers. You know, sometimes you catch a little bit of the zinc. It's not fitting on again real well up here because of the ring that I put on, but pretend I didn't put a ring on there. Oh, let's put it.
Because you would just then put rings in the wood frame if you were doing it this way. You wouldn't put a ring on.
Yeah, I wouldn't put a ring on there. But so you can see how this is, right? So this goes on something like this, and then there are what's really important. A couple of things here. This is some brass screws that we sell here, and so I don't know how well you can see this, but on this one, I drilled a hole here, right in the side, and it goes into that piece. And how I did that was, sometimes that's a little tricky to do, and this is a vise. I think it's called a corner vise that I picked up at a hardware store, or if you have a really nice woodworking facility nearby, they have probably a little bit nicer ones. This was relatively inexpensive. I think it cost me maybe around $10 or something. But what it does is it helps hold the wood in place so that you can kind of line it up. You can tighten this down.
Nice. What's that called?
It's called an angle vise. And they come differently. I mean, there's different types. I've seen one with springs or something. This one's got, I have to tighten it down. But so you see how it holds it like at a 45. So now I can come in and drill through here, and it's going to drill into the next piece of wood. So when I go in to put the screws in, it's lined up, and I don't have to do anything else about it. So one thing I wanted to point out, though, when you're putting in the screws, and I know we have these kind of fancy looking, shiny brass screws, but, brass is actually stronger than zinc and some of the other metals that screws are made out of. So we usually recommend the brass because, just because of that reason, right? Usually your panels are going to be heavy and you want something strong enough to hold it. So, and the other thing that's really important about this is you always, this is the bottom of the panel, and for this purpose, this is the bottom of the panel, and these are the sides. So the screw goes into the side, not in the bottom. If you put the screw in the bottom, the weight of the panel can push on that screw. So if we screw into the side here, that's going to just provide more strength. Yeah.
Into the
good way.
into the bottom, right?
Yeah. So we want to do it horizontally in there. So same deal. So I had drilled one, up on the top. I would do the same thing on that one. Nice thing about oak is you can stain it or just leave it natural. And then we talked about attaching something to it. I didn't take these out of the bag, but hopefully you can see them. These are some hooks that just literally just screw on the side of the oak frame, and then you can attach your chain to that. And again, you want to, especially on the oak, you want to attach from the sides and not from the top. If we put anything in the top, all that weight of the panel is going to be underneath whatever you attach to the top, like eye holes or those eye screws or something, and then you don't want that pulling on there. So we always put with wooden frames on the side. The other thing, working with oak, if you haven't worked with it before, it is a really hard, dense wood. So you need to pre-drill a hole first before you go ahead and start. You won't be able to just put a screw in there. You have to drill a hole first. Pre-drill it. And I know that these on the back tell you what size hole you need to drill for those of you that want that sort of information.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions here about strength. Deborah asks, are there guidelines about reinforcing between your pieces in a large panel, such as a restrip, or if it's going into a wooden frame, is there any need for reinforcement?
Yeah, reinforcement is, I don't know if there's any set rules because of a variety of reasons. One is sometimes the design, right? I mean, if you have a piece that's 2 by 2 feet and it has a bunch of solder lines in it, it's going to be a pretty strong and stiff panel. If you have a 2 by 2 foot piece and there's only 6 pieces of glass in there, you can see where that might be a little weaker because there's not as many solder seams. So usually our recommendation then would be using some kind of reinforcing. We sell a couple of products that are like strips that kind of hide into the seam where you don't really see them. Otherwise, traditionally what people do is put a rebar on the panel. They'll attach it to the back of it. I can tell you that the advice that I've gotten through the years has been, for the most part, if you were doing an autonomous panel, a panel that's just hanging in a window and it's not really in a window opening, you probably don't have to reinforce them. There's not really a lot of stress that's on them. The concern comes when you start inserting, stained glass panels into actual openings, a front door, side lights, transoms, those types of things. Then you would want to start, thinking about, reinforcing. Again, one thing might be design. You might want to, figure out how your design is. I can tell you a real brief rule of thumb is when you start approaching 3 feet, like 36 inches, then you start thinking about reinforcing. So then the rule sort of is every 18 inches, you would think about some kind of reinforcement. I know that's kind of a 4-second, explanation.
But it is really that vague sometimes. I mean, it's just kind of, you hear all kinds of recommendations, right? So, but I do think that's the main one, right?
And Kimberly asks, going back to the framing, would you recommend using a wood glue also with the screws?
Oh, well, I guess it would.
Would you? I don't think it would hurt.
Oh gosh, it certainly wouldn't hurt. But for me, I don't know what. I always think about if I have to take the frame apart for some reason, like let's pretend like I had to do a repair job on it. I can tell you if it's not glued, it's a whole lot easier to take apart. But certainly the wood would be better. I mean the glue would be better. It would be nicer seams and a little bit stronger. But I guess it just depends on how. I don't always feel very confident. I want to feel like I have an out if I have to take that panel out of the wood frame. So, but great question. Thanks for the question. It's just really keep coming because otherwise Val and I have nothing to talk about. So.
Oh, we have patinas. We
got patinas we didn't talk about. So we have a couple of. I grabbed some patinas. It's got a fly.
Oh my gosh.
So these are some patinas that we have here at Delphi. There's patina for solder. That's black. This is also for solder, and it turns a copper color. This is a patina for zinc. So I know sometimes people are like, they'll buy this one for black and this black patina, and they think they can patina everything on their panel, but really this does not work on the zinc. So this will, it looks like it does,
well,
right?
Well, it kind of does until you wipe it. And
it'll just wipe right off. It doesn't really bite into the metal. So there is a specific patina for zinc. There's a variety of ways of applying patinas, right? You can use a brush and paint them on. People use, I know some people use Q-tips, which seems way too nitpicky to me.
Well, they absorb too, which is kind of not helpful.
Yeah, I think you know sometimes with the Q-tips, I've noticed with the black, you can get a more of a like a pewter look. You know, if you don't want something too dark, it's a nice way of maybe getting something that's just slightly darker than the silver of the solder. You can use an old rag. I'm at home a lot of times. I use like an old cotton T-shirt. I think that works pretty well for applying it. But yeah, or using a toothbrush. People do sometimes because you can get into all the little nooks and crannies.
I sometimes just pour a little bit.
Yeah, I think you and I do the thing.
Do we? And then I just use a toothbrush and move it around.
I do that.
Do you want to do that? Do we have a toothbrush?
We don't have a toothbrush, but we're just going to do it.
I think it's cool because.
You want to, I'm guessing you might want to see the patinas.
It's just
familiar with them.
It's a chemical
reaction. Are you going to do that?
I'm gonna just
sweet.
Well, but you can do black somewhere, and I'm just going to do.
You're not going to be able to.
I don't have a brush or anything.
I don't use a brush.
Okay, I'll just. It's an acid as well, by the way, though, so you don't want to.
I just use this is why.
Okay, you don't want to get it on your fingers and then rub your eye. Copper is the one that takes a little funky, and it'll. This doesn't look all that great, but once you polish it, it's when it really shines up. But you see how it's just immediate. It's just totally immediate when you put it on there. And then you do have to rinse this off.
You do have to rinse it off. So
that's the copper. And like I said, it doesn't.
We have a little water.
It doesn't look that great.
That's not the right.
Oh, whoops. What do you
Sorry,
want?
that was a patina for the zinc. I thought you were going to do the other one. Oh, okay.
And to answer your question, everything that you're seeing in this video today, we sell at our website, delphiglass.com.
Well, we don't sell that one thing, but that thing.
The Vise.
That Vise thing.
So the
Vise was found at a hardware store.
Val mentioned the copper, and the copper is really, it can be finicky. The copper patina can be real finicky. In particular, if you have water that's exceptionally hard water, or if you have like some city waters have a lot of fluoride in them, they tend to be really, it can be a little challenge with the copper patinas. I know some people that use only distilled water when they're, to clean their panels when they know they're going to use copper patina.
So I was just kind of showing how the black actually did kind of discolor it, but it's going to, as soon as you polish it, it's going to come back off.
So you can see what the black does.
But it is.
It's interesting.
You know,
Val was mentioning on either patina, you need to rinse them off with water, and then with copper, I dry it right away. But with the black, I don't necessarily dry the black one right away. I usually wait until like the next day before I do anything with it because I think it still darkens a little bit. And even then, when I look at the black the next day, if it's not dark enough, I just add some more patina. Right, we just put it right on there and let it kind of give it a minute or two to kind of darken it. Sometimes, again, if you didn't do a nice job of cleaning the flux off of the off your panel, right, with a flux remover, that can interfere with how well the patinas work too. You might notice that the patina's not grabbing. Sometimes the patina might look blotchy or something, and that might be just a cleaning issue that you didn't clean it correctly, earlier.
Can you fix that?
Yeah, you can fix it. So I grabbed some steel wool. I'm not sure how familiar you are with steel wool, but it comes in different grades, which refers to how fine it is. And then this is a 4-0 steel wool, so super fine, right? And so we use this. Sometimes I'll tear off a little piece, right? And maybe if I can. I know you gotta go the right way to get it. Okay, well.
Okay, there you go.
So we pull off a little piece, right? And then what this can do is a couple things. So it can remove, I'm gonna dry, I know there's a little patina on this, so I just wanna dry this, and then we can take it and come in and remove the patina and see how it takes that patina off. And then I can go back in. The reason why we use this 4-0 steel wool is it won't scratch the glass, right? So if we go with anything more aggressive, we run the risk of scratching glass. But here, you see how it took the patina right off. So then I could come back in and reapply the patina. What's nice about the steel wool also is it will help with the zinc. The zinc, I don't know if you've noticed this before, Val, but a lot of times it's kind of oily or greasy. Mm-hmm. And because it gets shipped to us in a box, and I guess they don't want it to oxidize while it's sitting around in the box. And that can interfere with it wanting to grab a patina. I know we haven't shown the zinc patina yet, but we can show you that in a second. But let's say you did this and you wanted to bring this back to silver. You can come in and, I know there's a little patina there. All I'm doing is smearing around that patina, but you get that.
yeah.
So, I use it even without patina. Like, I'll show you over here. Like, sometimes I use it just to shine up the
Metal.
yeah, the zinc, right? So that it looks a little nicer and not so. Because sometimes, you'll get flux on it. Oh, this is a great example right down here. I don't know how well you can see. This little black kind of smudgy mark is from the flux. And sometimes the flux does that to the zinc and just leaves a little mark. And so again, with the really fine steel wool, you can just come in and you can see how it takes little tiny scratches out of there, just kind of buffs that up, makes it look all nice and shiny again.
Cool. Well, now will this?
Yeah, I think you could do
Will
that.
this work
Yeah,
with
it's
that?
a patina.
It's like still the neutralizing.
Yeah, it'll neutralize the patina. Yeah, a lot of times the flux cleaners are also patina cleaners. They kind of neutralize what's going on with the patinas.
Patina cleaners?
I don't think that's a real thing. I think I made that up, but
Yeah, this is handy. Yeah, so, that's kind of it. That's kind of what it does. But like I said, this would get a whole lot prettier if we...
yeah, it's a kind of a weird panel, isn't it, with the black and the copper. That's cool. That's really artsy.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. One of the things I don't think we had this last time when we were talking about last week soldering, or I'm sorry, our last video when we were talking about how to solder, and we were talking about handling the solder. The concern again is that that's where the lead is at, right? And so it gets on our hands, and you want to clean that off. And like I tell you, a lot of times just washing your hands is a great way of doing that. But this particular product
Removes heavy metal.
yeah, removes heavy metals. It says this one has like a little abrasive in it. It's so where I really like it's working with the zinc. A lot of times, just working with the zinc, you'll get this black kind of smudgy stuff on your hands from the zinc. And then this stuff, I'll tell you, man, does it ever just clean it off really quite easily without drying out your hands.
That's D-lead
Yeah,
abrasive
D-lead.
hand soap.
Yeah, nice stuff. Yeah, we're not getting any kind of kickback from these people. We're just, Belle and I are just telling you the products
What
that we
works,
use
right?
and the
Yeah.
ones that we like. So it works pretty well. The last thing we have to talk about, I know this one's been a little long, so thanks for bearing with us. But the last thing we want to talk about was, so let's pretend that we're done soldering, we attached rings, we did everything we wanted to do, we patinaed it, right?
And then let's pretend that it looks
Yeah, let's
beautiful.
pretend that it's really nice looking, right? So if you squint, it's really pretty. It's pretty nice looking. Then we would put some kind of a finishing compound on is what it's called, right? It is really just, usually it's some type of a wax. We sell like 3 different types. I couldn't find the other one out there on the floor, but we've got and they all work just, about the same. They work really quite well. But they are some kind of wax product that we're going to put on. So the thinking again is that, all this metal is exposed to the air and it will start to oxidize. I mean, a silver panel, if you don't do anything to it after you get done cleaning it, over the years, it's just going to turn dark. I mean, that's one reason why, old church windows are so dark. The black lines are because they've been oxidizing for many years, right? So what the wax does is protect the air from getting to it, so that the metals won't oxidize, and so your silver solder will stay nice and shiny and silver, or your copper patina, as Val was pointing out, will end up being really nice and shiny. And even the black looks really nice once you kind of patina it. It even looks a little deeper, I think, sometimes in color, don't you?
And you can go back, don't you think? I mean, if you have a panel that's hanging and it starts to look a little dark over years or something, I just put a little on my paper towel and I can just like rub the solder seams again and they just shine right back out. So
Speaking of solder seams, Deborah's asked, would you lightly steel wool your solder lines before the patina to help darken your lines?
Personally, I don't find that all that necessary. Sometimes you might, like I was mentioning before, I think, copper tends to be the copper patina tends to be a little finicky sometimes. So again, if you live in an area that that the water is a little hard or something.
Sometimes the water minerals in your water can affect.
Or I'd say
too.
fluoride, like if you're in city water, sometimes there's a lot of fluoride in it. Those types of things can kind of interfere with the copper patina. With the black patina doesn't really care. So you might want to, if you're doing copper patina, might go and hit it with a steel wool. It doesn't really take that long to do it, so probably not a bad idea.
We've got another question from Lori. Are you able to get your zinc frame as black as the patina to solder? I have not been able to. How many layers of zinc patina on the frame do you have?
That's a good one. That's a great question. Like Val and I have been doing this for a few years, and I think I was saying this to Val a little while ago about how I think the patinas have changed over the course of time, and I think they're just not as effective as they used to be. So they're probably safer. I'm sure they're probably a whole lot safer. But because of that, it does make it sometimes a challenge to get the black to be as dark as you might like it. So sometimes it is just you need to apply it more than once. Now, we didn't show the zinc patina, but we'll show you just briefly here if that's okay. We'll just take a minute to do it. I'm just going to put the paper towel underneath to catch some of the patina.
But I do think across the board, the black is the one that also a lot of people have trouble keeping it black, right? It ends up going a bit bronzy colored.
Oh, the black? Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to get jet black and keep it that way.
Again,
so.
I think the key with the zinc patina and the zinc is to make sure the zinc is really nice and clean. I've actually gone in and used like a dish soap, a degreaser or something because of the little oil that's on the zinc sometimes, and then I've used that to clean the zinc. And then, as you can see, I also think that using a little bit of steel wool on it also helps. As you know, Val and I are really into the pouring method, so I'm just gonna pour a little bit on here. The reason why I like pouring is because it's a concentration of the patina right on the metal, right? I mean, if we use a brush or even a rag, some of that gets absorbed. But do you see this? So the key also with this one, do you see what happens when I just wipe it right off, right? And again, this is what's made for the zinc. The key to these products is to leave them for a while. And this could be like even, 10 or 15 minutes or so to make sure that it really gets nice and black. I know Val was just using her finger.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Kimberly's asking, she's heard in some Facebook groups, people adding salt to the black patina.
Oh, yeah. I've read that. I've tried that.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, I'm not sure how effective that is, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. I personally haven't found it to be that much more effective than what we're doing here. But yeah, so again, on the zinc, I think one of the keys, and I think even on the other black one too, is leave them on a little bit longer. The copper patina you want to put on and take off almost as soon as you can. But the black, I think, letting it sit on the metal for a little while helps because...
So how long is a little while? Because
Yeah,
don't
I
you
think
also
can-
hear stories about people who've left it on overnight,
Oh, yeah.
and then they
Gosh,
say,
that's good, yeah.
and then they say their glass
point.
is stained, and I think that can happen. So when
Yes.
we say leave it on for a little while, we're not saying leave it on overnight.
No,
right?
no. Oh, no,
Okay.
I'm not saying that. Yeah, what I'm saying is that, like this, for example, I don't know if you can see how nice and dark this is, right? So I would rinse this off, right? Because the patina's on there, as Val's mentioning, you don't want any of the patinas to sit on anything for too long. Too long is definitely overnight. But I would let this sit 10 or 15 minutes easily, and then rinse it off. But don't do anything to it. Don't touch it. I think the tendency we have is we want to go in right then and start polishing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wait till the next day with black patina to polish it, because the polish will take some of the patina off. So, and then again, the advantage to that also is you can look at it the next day, and if you don't think it's dark enough, you can reapply the patina. I'm with you though. I hear the issues with the zinc. I mean, I know lots of people that just end up just painting with zinc. They get black paint and they just use an enamel
Or
paint
put
or
it
something.
in a
Yeah.
wood frame of
Yeah,
some
and
kind.
cover it up, so-
Paint it black.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It certainly is. Patinas are not as easy as they used to be. But hopefully that was helpful.
Hopefully.
I don't know.
That's all we know. So
That was it.
I
That's
don't
totally
know
all-
what else to
That's
say.
totally all we know. So we couldn't even say anything more. But if you guys have any questions, or please get a hold of us. The outlets, you can email us at Facebook at Delphi Glass, or you can send us a message at
Facebook message, Instagram Messenger, all of the places. We're there for you.
Yeah. Or if you have ideas for topics, Val and I are always looking for one. I mean, if we get enough people ask us, we could maybe do a short one on reinforcing. If somebody wanted to see that, we could show you how to do that. Soldering some of the pieces and that kind of fun stuff.
Yep.
But otherwise, anything else? I think our next one is going to be something to do with fusing, glass fusing. So if you haven't done that before and you want to find out what glass fusing is like, we're going to be back, we think, in a couple of weeks. So Kaylee's going to do a nice job of letting everybody know when we're going to be back on.
Absolutely, you guys. We will post always the day before, just as a reminder for you guys, and turn on your notifications for when we go live. You can do that in your Facebook settings. We'll share a picture of that. So thanks for tuning in with us. I know this was a long one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.